of the words that's out there these days that's actually been around for a while, but it seems to get more and more important, certainly more and more used every day, is brand. We're always hearing about companies trying to establish their brand, and frankly, individuals at certain levels, they have their own brand as well. It's very important out there, and chances are you won't be able to do it yourself. You need to bring in an expert, and that's where we are today. The name of the company we're chatting with is HOW Creative. I love that. You're going to like how the name got there right now, because with HOW Creative, we have Howard Lim, our guest on the show today. Howard, how are you, sir? Great to see you.
Great, doing wonderful for a beautiful day.
Well, is it fair to say that HOW Creative came from your name? Did I pick that one?
It comes from three things. One from my name, and then how's it done? And then the how as an Indian. I always had a connection to Native Americans.
Very nice. Well, I'm glad your name wasn't Nottingham, because not creative just wouldn't be quite as successful. So good for you on that. You described yourself, you are a business and brand architect. Now, brand, as I mentioned, it's one of those words that everybody hears in their brand, and too many people that I've noticed, is the people I've talked to, think that the brand is simply the logo. Nothing could be further from the case. Go into us a couple of bullet points of what establishes a brand.
Yeah, sure. One of the more important things about branding is not what you say, is what everyone else says. So the logo, what people call a logo, is really the entry point to the brand, but that's really only 5% of it. It's more, how do you convey your message, and how do you get it where people are consistently saying the same thing of what you want them to say, because they own the brand in their mind and in their heart.
So let me ask you this, which is trickier? Having a new business and establishing their brand, or having an existing business and reestablishing their brand?
The easiest approach is when you have a new brand and it's done right the first time.
There you go.
Yeah, because what we do most of the time here is that you're exactly right. We're having to reposition companies because they've been off with their brand. And a lot of times they're not really getting the results that they're looking for, and they're not fulfilling on their potential because they haven't been positioned properly. Even though they've been around for even, like, say, several decades. I work with companies that have been around for several generations. It doesn't matter. There's always a potential that's not being filled because they're not positioned to fulfill on that potential.
You know, I got a kick out of the adjectives you put up there to describe yourself, and one of the bullet points I was looking at, back even before HOW Creative was around, for 30 plus years, you describe yourself as a disruptive innovator. What in the heck does that mean?
Well, there's business as usual and how we absorb information. And what it means to be a disruptor is to actually change the trajectory. So to give you an example, remember when there were VHS and beta tapes were around, and then out of the blue DVDs took place, and that became the media to use? That was one of our projects, is to actually literally change the direction of media to digital. That was just one of our projects where it was a disruptive, you could say, flow of media into a new media, which actually then changed the way we view things forever at that point. Now, of course, it's streaming video, but the point being is a disruptor, it changes the trajectory.
Fair enough, and that's a good thing for someone in your business. So you've been doing this a long time, like I said, but how, no pun intended, how and why was HOW developed? Why did you come up and decide to do your own thing?
Well, back in '87, I was actually laid off, and it was during the recession, and then I had a choice. The choice was to work for a company or create my own company. And the reason why I created my own company, because I saw what was possible with the computer when no one was able to get anything out of the Macintosh computer, basically in a laser printed 8.5 by 11 black and white piece of paper. And I saw that there's so much more potential than that. And then I had created a team, what's called a stripper, but anyways, a film stripper for print. And then a photographer that understood digital photography when it was just starting off. And anyways, I created this team that was able to take risks with me, and we created a digital company, and we're the first multidisciplinary company in Los Angeles back in '87, and we started a trend of things to come, you could say, in the digital world.
Okay, well that makes total sense now, and a lot of us have been laid off, certainly over the last 9 months or so, and it's the people like yourself that are able to, it's the old saying that one of my favorites, we're not measured in life by what happens to us, we're measured by how we handle it. I think you handled it very well coming up with How Creative. One thing I want to check with you, what's your company vision? Where do you see this thing headed?
Well, my vision is that there's a problem out there where 90 to 95% of companies fail within the first 2 to 5 years or become stagnant. So I create a business model that actually is designed to invert that number into successful businesses, successful products, successful services, successful information. And so that's our vision, is actually changing that number around to successful companies rather than failures.
And then, of course, since you're in the business, I got to ask, as far as your brand goes, when it's all said and done, what do you want to leave behind as kind of your brand that everybody will remember you by?
What I want to leave behind is the impact that our company's had on a lot of different size companies, whether if it's a startup company and Fortune 500 companies and everything in between. And really what we want to leave behind is a better tomorrow, a tomorrow where everyone can thrive, where the economy is strong, where there's more, you could say, more opportunity for everyone.
I think that's beautiful. There's a lot of businesses that should take that same approach. But hey, well, let me ask you this: speaking of a lot of businesses, you're not the only one. You may be the best one. You're certainly the best one I'm talking to at the moment. But there's a lot of people in the branding business. What spin do you have with your company, with How, that makes you, say, more unique than the others out there?
Well, what makes us unique is that I've learned from the first 10 years of my business, being in business for 34 years now, was representing the Fortune 500 companies of really where branding came from. It was really the ownership of the big three medias, TV, radio, and print. A question becomes, how do you actually, quote unquote, create enough awareness where you draw attention to a product or service or information? And by representing these large companies from HBO, Disney, Apple, so forth, is where I started to learn what it really took to build an architecture plan to actually be that quote unquote company and the only choice for that consumer. And so that comes from my background of 10 years of actually being in the field working with Fortune 500s. What makes us unique nowadays is not just only the branding aspect of how to build a world-class brand, but also how to build a world-class business. And so I do a fold, because got it from my father being a whole brain thinker. So I look at strategic planning from the business model, and how do you combine that with the consumer, meaning how do you brand that business? And so now there's a match and a holistic approach to building businesses. And that's what makes us unique, is that we're actually incorporating two hemispheres together, which is very unusual. But the bigger point that I want to say is that it draws quicker results in a shorter period of time.
So many people want those measurable results just to justify that they did the right thing. So I'm glad you got that in there. I know that's very important to your clients. I don't have a lot of time left. I was intrigued earlier when you mentioned that early on in your career you worked with going from VHS and beta to other forms of video. Any other significant accomplishments that might dazzle me, if you want to share it?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did is we helped reposition the city of Santa Monica, which is known as one of the most popular cities in the United States. So we work with the Convention and Visiting Bureau of how to actually bring more attraction to that city, that coastal city, versus all other coastal cities. One of the key things to branding is differentiating. So we really had to position why tourists and business people, women and men, would want to do business in Santa Monica. And then Santa Monica is really now a very thriving economy, extremely thriving economy. And we've also, we designed a debit system card for all the school system. We helped out UCSB in Santa Barbara create the Access program, which is, back then you had a student ID, but we created it where it was like a student ID with a mag stripe. And so now you could actually purchase your books and so forth from it.
Multifunctional. I mean, that's just a little tip of the iceberg. Very impressive, as I'm sure everything you've done and everything you will do will be as well. How Creative, Mr. How himself, Howard Lim, our guest. Good stuff, sir. Howard Lim, thank you much. Take care.
Thank you for having me.